Welcome back. We're discussing Burundi's political and social upheaval. And back to our panel. And Fred, let's pick up with you in the studio. There is a regional dimension to this crisis. As we know, the region is split along ethnic lines, Hutus and Tutsis as well. And Burundi has accused neighbouring Rwanda, led by Paul Kagame, who's a Tutsi, of involvement. Let's just have a listen to Pierre Nkurunziza on that.
We spoke about other issues facing the region, especially Rwanda, which is a country that has been causing us problems. We asked for UN support to help us regarding Rwanda, to stop provoking us, so we can go back to having good neighborly relations like we used to.
Fred, obviously these accusations are a real problem, finger-pointing. Could the region explode again?
I think the current situation in the region needs to be properly managed, and that's why I am very impressed that just this few days ago, yesterday, that President Benjamin Mkapa has been brought in as the special mediator. As you know, he was president from 1993 to 2005.
In Tanzania, which of course authored the Arusha Accords.
The Arusha Accord. And the solution to the situation in Burundi is going to be found in the Arusha Accord, despite some of the challenges that we face now. I am also happy that as the EAC meeting was taking place yesterday, that the United Nations investigators team arrived and looking at killings that have occurred in Burundi. I think these are all important signals that has to be sent to all stakeholders, that there is going to be definitely consequences for acts that have been committed. In terms of the issues between Burundi and Rwanda, the president of Burundi has accused and pointed fingers at Rwanda. Rwanda, on his own part, and I remember the Foreign Minister, Louise of Rwanda, has also then decided that they would start looking at alternative relocation for refugees. As you know, we have almost 240,000 displaced people, and Rwanda is responsible for housing some of these refugees.
And how they behave too.
And how they behave. It would be very nice if we could be provided more information based on Burundi.
Bubble Kessler in Johannesburg, what about the regional dimensions in this? Rwanda is a regional powerhouse. Do not see eye to eye with Pierre Nkurunziza, and also other players in the region and internationally.
Right, I think, but first of all, just to touch a bit on what Patrick was saying earlier, I think we risk the danger of sweeping a problem as huge as is happening in Burundi. We say things are fine, or the things are, the situation is being managed and things are getting to normal. Like my colleague has just mentioned now, we have 240,000+ refugees out there. We have well over 40 people dead. We are discovering mass graves and so forth. So I think the gravity of the situation is such that we shouldn't, take it as lightly as my colleague Patrick was putting it earlier. Now, coming to the regional dimension of this all, I think we've flogged and pointed out the point that the African Union is doing its best from a regional perspective, to perhaps even in terms of image, to be seen to be doing something before the wider international community, in the sense of the UN, for example, comes in, and that's a good step. I mean, even it could do better, but at least there's something happening on that front.
In terms of the region, it's very interesting that not just in Burundi, but in Rwanda, Uganda and elsewhere, there is this big discussion about third-termism or more in terms of African leaders trying to seek to change the constitutional limits on their thing. Do you think this is actually part of the problem, obviously not just in Burundi, but regionally as well, and is slowing down perhaps the solving of these problems?
Well, it's interesting. If you think about East Africa as a region, actually, East Africa has had the lowest incidence of third-termism. We have relatively. Again, relatively is a big word. So you have the three Great Lakes countries. You have Uganda, Rwanda, and Burundi sort of grappling with these issues in different directions and having different historical trajectories. But generally the region has, prior to the last 5-6 years, had a reputation for being one of the more democratic regions of the developing world, not just in Africa. So you've had electoral transitions in Tanzania since Nyerere passing. You've had complicated, but still we've had transitions in Kenya. Even in Somalia, they're now grappling with elections. They've had the change of government, etc. So there was certainly in the mid-2000s there was this optimism that East Africa could somehow become a beacon of democracy and electoral change and follow in the footsteps of Southern Africa, which has had a little bit more of a reputation for this. Third-termism is an interesting thing. I think it's driven by different things. Certainly personality is a big part of it. This is what we're seeing in Burundi. This is what we're seeing in Rwanda. This is what we're seeing in Uganda. This indispensability complex that comes from leading a country out of crisis. This idea that this leader, because I oversaw this moment of turmoil, I am the rightful, quote-unquote, owner of this country. And that's not something that you can manage necessarily with political processes. That is something that you manage on an individual basis. And I think this is an opportunity in Burundi that perhaps needs to be explored a little bit more. The fact that Nkurunziza, one of the things that's driving him is that he believes that he has been called by God to save Burundi. And that is a call on the religious community, on churches, to jump in and show some kind of leadership on this personality issue.
I just want to bring in Patrick here. Is the personality of Pierre Nkurunziza at the heart of this?
I think the personality of Nkurunziza especially has been a key specifically for his political party, the CNDD, because he has been someone who is very close to the population, especially the rural population. And as you can remember, Burundi has more than 90% of the total population living in the rural area. So he has been able to mobilize the masses. And that has been, I think, a key to the fact that his political party presented him again as the candidate, because what we see is that CNDD, FDD has not prepared anyone who was able to mobilize the population as Nkurunziza is able to do.
I just want to bring in Fred here for a final word. You know, with all this happening in Burundi and the tension in the region, one thing that does suffer, of course, is development in Africa. How much does instability in Burundi and elsewhere in the Great Lakes region, of course, mean that development from the outside world, much needed development, is actually not coming through?
Before I address that, I just want to be very clear with Bob Wakisa that my point here is not that the situation in Burundi is managed, but that it needs to be managed so we do not get into civil war and chaos.
You weren't downplaying it.
We're not downplaying it. We are in a very bad situation, but if we remember, between 1993 and 2005, we had almost 300,000 people that were killed in the civil war. So we should, as much as possible, use all efforts, diplomacy, international intervention to try to prevent another genocide and another killing of 300,000.
I think that's everything. Everyone agrees on that. So what about the development of Africa, that region of Africa, being put on hold while this crisis?
And that's really the problem, because as Burundi was evolving between 2005 and 2015, we've now seen another monkey wrench in the development efforts of Burundi. The major export of Burundi is tea, coffee, and nickel, and of course uranium that they do have. There must be concerted effort to bring the development agenda of Burundi, which is going to impact on all of the 10-point-something million people of Burundi. And this, the African Union effort, the EAC effort, and the efforts of the international community should be to help Burundi transition through this, using all of the agreements that are within the Arusha Accord to find a solution so that we could have development as the main focus of the people of Burundi.